And this takes us to part 5, capitalizing your system and then implementation.
So how do I start implementing IBC?
You know, Nelson talks about desire. You've got to have desire. And it does require some honest introspection, as he says. You know, you've got to be honest with yourself. And sometimes it's difficult to be honest with ourselves. You know, what are we really doing with our money? Are we controlling our cash flows?
Mm-hmm.
You know, can we ratchet up our discipline? You know, it's like in my generation, when I was growing up, you know, you didn't talk about sex, politics, or religion. Today, it's you don't talk about money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's difficult. I mean, we're all human, right? Discipline's difficult. Self-honesty sometimes is difficult. And then when it comes to your money, that just adds a whole new level of stress.
Yeah. I like what you've mentioned to me before, and I've found it to be true, is that quote by Jim Rohn, that you're going to pay the price. You can either pay the price in the form of discipline or in the form of regret. The nice thing is you have an option. You get to choose. And it can literally pay dividends to choose discipline instead of to have to live with regret.
You know, discipline. You're talking about dividends. You know, referencing the dividend to a life insurance
Mm-hmm.
policy, but you know, health, as well as monetary. I mean, discipline has results, positive results. And whenever we're honest with ourselves and we really look at our money and our cash flows, what's really going on, we add discipline to that, and we have the desire to control the banking function in our life, it's Katie bar the door.
Absolutely.
You know, and then you need a good coach. Nelson tells you need a good coach, and you do need a new coach. There are over 300,000 licensed life insurance agents in America. God bless them. You know, there's only a couple of hundred that are practitioners at the NNI, Nelson Nash Institute, that, I mean, have made the effort to learn the infinite banking concept correctly. So you need a good coach. We all need a good coach. And you want one that's thoroughly familiar with the infinite banking concept. You do not want to be the expert in the room just because you mention IBC and you're the expert because no one else has heard of it. Yeah. Right? No.
You know, and people have told me too, or asked, you know, sometimes I'll explain it, and if I've done a good job, they'll say, you know, what's the catch? You know, why isn't everybody doing this? What's it cost? This kind of thing. And honestly, the cost, the price to pay up front is the learning curve.
No question.
To understand it. And there's, you know, you're right. People don't want to talk about money in general in the home and the family. But then even if you do reach a conversation about money, to turn that to the banking side, rather than to talk about everything people talk about on CNBC or whatever, the investing and all this type of thing, to turn it over to the financing side, to the banking side, the capital side, that's an additional hurdle. And in all honesty, for people, that is the major obstacle. And so when it comes to this part of the book in part 5, getting started, you know, you do have to choose to start now and to dig as deep as possible into your own financial situation, not just from the side that everybody else is used to looking at.
Yeah, no question. It takes patience, you know, beyond the desire and the honesty. You know, it takes patience. You can't, this is not a get rich quick scheme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes patience to go through the learning process, just being aware, doing the vetting, you know, and then building. Anything worthwhile, everything worthwhile takes patience and discipline. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's worthwhile. But, you know, above all, get started now as soon as possible. You know, we've all heard it. When is the best time to plant a shade tree? Right? 20 years ago. Well, I didn't. When's the second best time? Right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right now. I have come to believe that when you understand what's going on with the dividend paying life insurance policy structured this way, you literally and physically cannot put enough money in fast enough. That's a bold statement.
It's true, though. I've asked people, can you have too much capital? I don't know about you, but I can't, keep it coming.
Yeah, right. Then going through the becoming your own banker regularly, connecting with like-minded people, the entrepreneur that is building capital and using his system, the family that is financing automobiles, vacations, marriages, weddings, not marriages, but weddings. Um, you know, Iron sharpens iron. If you can teach me something from your perspective, right? You're seeing something that maybe I didn't see. You're sharing with me what you're doing and what the results are. I might see something that I didn't see before, and vice versa.
That's a good thing for people to keep in mind too, is when they're looking for someone to work with, a good coach, like you mentioned, is that's something to expect as a continuing relationship where you're going to continue the education. You're going to have a continuing communication with the agent and with other people that he may be involved with, may have a community of other people to speak with, may host events, may provide digital resources, something where there's going to be an ongoing basis of continuing education and communication.
Yeah, we hold or have what's called mini masterminds, and you should maybe participate, right? Because they're valuable. Other like-minded individuals that you can learn from, and the kind of people that you just want to, in general, be associated with. Those are the kind of people that are cool to hang around, right? So,
what is the retirement trap?
well, Nelson spends a little time here and a couple of other places in the book, Becoming Your Own Banker, right? It is a socialist concept. Now, if we think about that, retirement didn't really even come into our vocabulary until the 30s, right? And FDR bases Social Security on Otto von Bismarck 1890, structure. Um, and it's, if you think about it, retirement, to take out of service. You mean I have practiced whatever my profession is, um, a lifetime, gathering up all of that experience and knowledge, and you want to take that out of the marketplace to retire, to take out of service? I mean, that's beyond why would you even think about it? It's not mentioned in the Bible. Moses never retired. Noah didn't retire. It's not even a natural concept, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Economically speaking, I mean, it comes from a old economic fallacy called the zero sum fallacy. The idea that there's a fixed pie of wealth out there, and that in order to make room for the new workers, the new laborers that are growing older, you got to get rid of the older ones. It's sort of a perverse origin for this kind of concept to come about, and now people look forward to it. It has never made sense to me personally. I've always tried to pursue what was my passion, and it never made sense if you're pursuing your passion why you'd want to stop doing that someday. And you make a perfect point. You're going to be at a certain time in your work in your life where you've accumulated all this experience, wisdom, expertise. You have an opportunity to mentor, to start new enterprises with who knows who. Your network will be at its height. Why stop there? But people can decide for themselves what they want to do. It is true that if somebody wants to have passive income later in life and travel the world, do whatever they're going to do, an infinite banking policy will support that. There's no question. You could look at it this way. It's like, suppose you want to retire, right? You think that that's what you want to do. Well, there's two options. You could be wrong, in which case it will be beneficial to build capital in the meantime, right? Or you could be right. You could end up 20, 30, 40 years down the road and decide that you want to stay at home more, travel, do whatever it is you're going to do. It doesn't hurt to have passive income then at that point in time, you know? So it's, and Nelson really goes, Nelson himself, as of this filming, 87 years old, and is still as passionate as ever about the concept and about educating people on it. You mentioned biblical figures. People in my own life, I know you have no plans on stopping anytime soon. So it's like, of the examples in my world, it doesn't make sense. But I can also see a world where people have grown up with that in mind.
Yep.
And even for that individual, it's still beneficial for them to take control of the banking function.
No question. Nelson, my mentor, your mentor, still going at 87. His mentor, Leonard Reed, graduated at age 85, the night before he was going to deliver a talk. So I want to be just like that. That's a great example. I might change the terms. We all might change the terms in which we work in our endeavors. But if you look at retirement in America, right, the basis or the genesis really comes into, the landscape in the 30s with the first, second great socialist expansion. I digress. But based on Otto von Bismarck, like I said earlier, 1890, taking the young German workers out of the workforce to make, or the older German workers to make room for the new. Okay, well then comes along World War II. Right, so you have all these GIs coming back from the war, and man, you better give them something to do, right? And there's such a limited pie, such a scarcity mentality, the zero sum, somebody has to lose for there to be a gain, which is, oh my gosh, does that sound like Wall Street? Zero sum? Okay. They're all the GIs are coming back, they create the GI Bill. They're all going into the workforce. Now the employers are competing for workers. Well, how do you give a man a raise without giving him a raise? Well, you create this pension idea for retirement. So you keep your head down, work hard, don't look up, and then when you're old, we'll take care of you. What a dependent mentality, right? And Paul Perot, he mentions Paul Perot. Paul Perot wrote a book, The Pension Idea. Nelson himself brought that back into publication. Paul Perot was, early in fee, right? And it's a little booklet that, you should go to the website and get it. It's a worthy read. Now, Paul Perot didn't know anything about or didn't understand life insurance like Nelson did and does. But, just the idea of taking out of services is just, it's bass backwards to where I come from.
Yeah. And like you say, we talk a lot about abdicating responsibility, giving up the responsibility for your own future financial situation over to an employer, over to the government, over to anybody but yourself. The responsibility belongs with the individual. The title of the book is Becoming Your Own Banker, not maintaining not some other situation where you're maintaining dependency on a third party.
If we continue down this conversation on retirement, if you look at, the IRAs and the 401k, the 401k came about really in the late 80s, the Keogh plan, and all of the financial industry, was taught and trained to convey a couple of misnomers. Number one, that you're going to retire in a lower tax bracket. Number two, if you save 10% in a tax qualified plan and get a deduction today to do that, you're going to be a millionaire because the market goes up forever, right?
Right.
All right. Well, you tell me, which one didn't happen? Right?
Sounds like both of them really to me.
Okay. And then you're going to retire in a lower tax bracket. You mentioned that earlier, having less income. I don't want to travel the world on less income. But now let's consider, where does that money go that typically, generally, the money that goes into qualified retirement plans, where does it wind up?
All right, the mutual funds.
Right, into the equities of America, right? You know, that's the largest block of equities in the world is the American retirement.
Yep.
All right. Now, aren't you a little suspect if government creates a problem, onerous taxation, and then they provide you with the solution out of benevolence? I really care for you and your family. You're not saving enough money, and I don't want you to be dependent upon us in retirement because Social Security is not going to take care of it. So you need to participate in a qualified retirement plan. And here we are creating the largest block of equities in the world. All right, now based on that, isn't about a third of that money Uncle Sam's money anyway?
It's got to be taxed at some point.
It's just deferring the taxes into an unknown tax bracket and an unknown with calculation. It's an unknown. I mean, okay. Now, and Nelson mentions this floating trial balloons in the 70s, right? And I can completely envision the day where Uncle Sam shows up and says, listen, you're a patriot. You love your country.
Yeah.
Your country's in trouble because they're not going to wake up and all of a sudden create balance sheets, right? Quit spending money and not be dependent upon debt. You're a patriot. You know, a third of that money is ours anyway. And we're in trouble. We need our third now.
And maybe they stop there.
Maybe. Let's look at Venezuela. Let's look at Brazil.
Argentina
over and over. Yeah. We can look at the pension funds across America today, state by state.
Absolutely. You know, California, my home state.
Then, of course, we've all seen, maybe experience, you know, the individual that retires at 65 or 67, they die within 2 or 3 or 4 years. Their sense of purpose for a man, a male especially, right? And then you know what the odds of when one spouse dies, you know what the odds of another spouse dying shortly after?
It's got to be pretty high, right?
You know, early in my life insurance career, there were companies that wouldn't issue a policy on a surviving spouse within 12 months of losing a spouse. I mean, they're actuaries, they're bean counters.
Yeah.
Right? That'll get your attention.
How does the cost of acquiring loans from an insurance company compare to that of conventional lenders?
Well, there's really no comparison. But to do a comparative analysis, I mean, let's talk about that. Number one, I have found most people don't consider their time, effort, and energy jumping through the third-party lender's hoops. Right? They discount the fire out of that. You know, and then the cost of acquiring loans. We can take any example you want, but what comes to mind is a real estate loan, right? Say I'm a real estate investor and I'm just expanding my portfolio and I'm going to do it with your money. And I understand leverage and cash flows, right? But I've already got a portfolio of properties. I've got to create a pro forma up to date. I've got to pay the CPA, right, to sign off on the numbers. And his signature is going to be right above that statement that says, don't rely on me for these numbers. I got them from the guy that's borrowing the money.
Right.
Right. And then you got to pay him to do that. And then 2 years of whatever, all your K-1s, 1040s, and tax and corporate. And then it's got to go to the committee. Now, if I'm expanding my portfolio, there might be a time element involved. There might be an opportunity, right, that I'm trying to fund. And the first one that shows up to that opportunity with cash wins. And I don't mind jumping through some hoops if I can maintain control sometimes. But I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are unknown too. You know, what if I was reading about a prominent internet marketer, Grant Cardone, 2009. His bank goes under, new bank buys up the assets, calls the loans due.
What do you mean calls the loans due?
Yeah, there you go. How about that fact? Almost every loan out there in the big wide world from a third-party lender is callable. Who cares what the amortization schedule says, the payment schedule? It doesn't matter. If the bank wants their money, they have a legal right to demand it from you. And then good old collateral kicks in, right? When you signed that loan, you gave up control. You get, and the third party lending finance community is built upon taking control of your property from you. And it comes in the form of a collateral assignment. As soon as you can't pay, which is when they say they have a right to the property you've signed over to them. And then some loans you'll get and say, oh, it's no collateral, right? No collateral.
I love those.
Yeah, right. Isn't that great? But there's always a personal guarantee, which just means that everything that you own is the collateral. So there's no escaping it. And the same goes, that goes for mortgages. It goes for credit cards. These companies, and you signed a stack of documents that hid away all of their legal rights. And you agree that they have the authority to take that, to demand that money from you when they so choose. And so you have the collateral, and then on top of that, the uncertainty behind whether bank policy is going to change, ownership of the loan portfolio is going to change, the staff member, the individual that you interface with at the bank, maybe he gets a promotion, gets transferred, demoted, whatever. And now you've got to learn a whole new person, a whole new set of policies, potentially a whole new organization. What's that cost? And what's the price of all of that uncertainty? You know, do they bake that into that interest rate that they may or may not show you? Of course not. And so just like you started this off with, there is no comparison. I think with a policy loan, depending on your state, it's like 1 or 2 pages to get a loan from an insurance company that you have first priority, where you have the contractual right to demand that loan from the insurance company. It's another world. People who in the modern, 2018 America, when we're shooting this now, have this stigma with debt. And it's perfectly understandable. We've just gone through reason after reason of why you might be suspicious of debt with third parties that are not under your control. But a policy loan is a whole different animal. It looks almost nothing like typical debt that you'd get from a third party. The control is different. The terms are totally different. The only similarity is that it's a credit instrument. But the nature of the collateral, the guarantees underneath that collateral, it's just another world.
You gotta mention, excuse me, you've got to mention non-recourse loans, right? Because somebody's going to say, oh, what about the non-recourse loan? Well, go find the animal and see how easy it really is to acquire that. All right. And then the loan is still controlled by the lender. They're going to tell you how much you're going to pay back, when you're going to pay it back, and it's still callable. I don't know of a loan that is not callable. I remember growing up in the bank calling loans that my dad had. I didn't know what a callable loan was. All right. Okay.
That means the loan's over.
Okay. So they're exercising their contractual right. Right. They need that loan completed immediately. If you look at a loan from the life insurance company, collateralizing your cash value, contractually, you have the right to do that on demand, like you said. But now I control the loan repayment. I'm going to tell the company when I'm going to pay it back, at what interest rate. Now, I'm going to pay the insurance company an interest rate, no question. We have talked about that. But if I'm going to be an honest banker, then I'm going to repay the loan at the market rate of interest. And then if I really understand what's going on in the big wide world, I'm going to pay the loan back at the price and the rate that I value my capital. And I value my capital more than the bank values their capital. Well, wonder why. Let's look at that. I had to work for my capital. I had to create something of value, right? The bank just prints digits and money. Why should they value that? But then they're going to require real assets to collateralize that, something that I have had to work for and earn and purchase. And then the future payments on that loan is my future production. It's like, oh my gosh, they want real assets, right? Real production and the means of the production. And they want to give me digits and then charge interest on that. So if you think that one through, it's not even moral.
Yeah, no question. No question.
But I control the loan repayment. I mean, I digress a little. I control the loan repayment. I'll pay it off early. I'll skip payments. I'll defer payments. I'm in control. Now, what's that worth? Put an interest rate on that, right? There is no comparison, policy loans to market loans, real estate loans of any kind. And that control, look, when there's not a problem, there's not a problem. There's never a problem until there's a problem. And when there's a problem, you want to maintain control.
But I can get a higher rate of return.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I mean, I love it. I can put my money here and get a higher. What's the rate of return? Oh, I'm doing real estate or gold or silver or cryptocurrency or whatever it is. Well, maybe so. Maybe you can get a higher rate of return in real estate. Well, if I have a life insurance policy, and I do, and it's structured for banking, and it is, and I have control, and I do, I get the results of that policy. And because I have that policy, I have access to capital. I can take advantage of every opportunity that I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get the results of that opportunity, whatever that rate of return is, plus what's going on in the life insurance policy. So a policy structured this way is not an either or asset. It is an and asset. I get the cash value. I get the death benefit. I get the dividend. I get the interest. I get access to the capital. And I get the real estate. And I get the retirement income. And I get the vacation. And I get the education. And
you can stop dealing with the bankers. I mean, I find that one thing that when this question comes up, I think it really is a hangover from staying in the investment mindset.
Yeah.
We're just pummeled day in and day out with invest in this, invest in that. It's all you see on Bloomberg, CNBC, the business networks and all the financial papers. And so it's, what's the internal rate of return? What's the average rate of return? And so to me, that speaks of, we haven't shifted from talking about investing to talking about building capital. And so hidden in there is an opportunity to say, no, of course, a rate of return matters, right? You want your investments to perform and all of that, but it's just not what we're talking about. And in fact, like you say, as far as being able to get to money that you control to take advantage of certain opportunities, if you have capital that you own and control, first of all, the opportunity will hunt you down, and you'll be in a better position to take control of those investments. And people think that they'll watch the news, they'll listen to the unlicensed financial entertainers out there who pose as advisors, who will talk about a 9 or 12% kind of return.
Oh, yeah.
And people in business laugh at that. They know that if they have the control of capital, that they can go out there and produce 200, 300, 400% returns. And they're not investing in your mutual fund. They're not buying into your 401k.
Don't point at me.
But you see what I'm saying? They're
Yeah,
not
no question.
playing along with the rest of the masses.
Right.
They are built, they have capital themselves, and they've attracted opportunities that are unique to them, that may even be exclusive to only them, that nobody else will ever hear about. By the time you hear about it, the opportunity is gone. And so if you want to talk about rate of return, there's an argument to put out there that, maybe the best way to generate the highest rate of return possible is to build capital that you own and control so that you can attract those unique opportunities to you, rather than join the rest of the club out there and finding all of the retail opportunities that are marketed directly to you through your television.
The best investment ever is in yourself and what you do for a living, right? Or what you know something about. Now, think about this. Okay, I'm the all-American family individual. I don't like investments, right? I don't want to go through the game of the financial guru or Wall Street, but I'm financing an automobile. I'm financing every major purchase that I'm going to make. So I don't even have to invest if I don't want to. All I do is control the banking function in my life. And when you look at how many automobiles, for example, you're going to drive over a lifetime, if you're fulfilling that banking function, you will receive the interest that would have went to the bank and the dividend that would have went to the bank. Now that comes to you. Right. And Nelson early on says that this is not about investments of any kind. This is not about a rate of return. The rate of return in a properly structured life insurance policy is very good. It's extremely. As a matter of fact, the insurance company is going to do very well with the cash values that they have to put to work to meet the future obligations of the policy, the future cash values and the future death benefit. If there's not a higher value, a higher purpose, the money should never be collateralized. It should remain right there. The insurance company's been around hundreds of years. They know how to put that money to work. So, but I don't have to go out and seek investments. The opportunities will show up. But if I just fulfill and perform the banking function as it relates to me, I'm going to come out very, very well. Okay, so if interest is a problem, Nelson directs the reader back to page 26, right, where he's going through clarifying interest. If I'm practicing banking and the cash flow, the loan repayment is going back to the insurance company, right, and I'm being an honest banker, the insurance company is charging me interest, but I'm repaying the loan at the market rate of interest. I'm calling that additional interest.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it is not interest to the insurance company. It is premium to the company. Mm-hmm. It is more capital to my system. In my project, I'm assigning that amount interest. Right.
You can even think of it numerically, right? If think of a credit card interest rate, say 20%, right? And the interest rate on a policy loan is say 5%. And you're going to charge yourself at a rate of interest of 20%. Then the 5 goes to the insurance company, and the equivalent of what would be the other 15 goes to your policy in the form of what's called paid up additions, which we've talked about, another form of premium payment. That money will go nearly dollar for dollar right to your cash value, your equity, your capital in your policy that will then grow for the rest of your life, or whoever the life of the insured is, with interest, with dividends.
It does. It causes future dividends to go up. That's pretty powerful when you understand that. So, just being an honest banker, I'm calling it was interest going to the credit card. Right. And the credit card company set the market rate of interest. And now when I keep that same cash flow as a loan repayment to the insurance company, 5 in your example is going to the insurance company as interest. Mm-hmm. The additional 15 is going to my policy.
Yeah.
Right. Not to the insurance company, to my policy, right, to the PUA, as you said.
I mean, if I can do it, I'd pay 100%, right? An insurance company can take their 5, take the remainder 95 and throw it into my policy. I mean, the point is to, as we said earlier, max out that PUA, max out however much you can get to that policy, max it out. Can you have too much capital? No. Can you pay too much premium? No. It's all a function of what your income can account for. And that I've talked to people about this before too. It totally changes your mindset. And I was speaking with a guy the other day, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt, right? And that's a anvil on the shoulders for weighing you down constantly. And you don't want to, I mean, you want to pay as little as possible for as long as possible. And then hopefully at some point the government will forgive the loan and you'll pay the tax. It'll be less than had you paid back the whole $300,000.
That's a strategy, right?
What a nightmare, right? A total nightmare. But when you're replacing the third party lender with an entity that you own and control, your policy, the incentives shift instantly. It's how much money can I get into this policy? How much of my income can I channel into my control for the rest of my life on a guaranteed growing basis? And then how can I leverage that to the best of my ability to lower my third-party debt, all the liability to third parties, and maximize my own financial performance? Now you're thinking in terms of how can I succeed over the long term rather than how can I get away as unscathed as possible, right? Totally different way to live a financial life. How can IBC be used to build intergenerational wealth?
An even distribution of age classes, 71 through 74, becoming your own banker. This is another very dear to my heart section.
Mm-hmm.
I love this section. And Nelson references Proverbs. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, which I agree with that. And now this section was also greatly influenced by Nelson's forestry days and thinking long range.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, he will tell you he thinks 2 or 3 generations into the future. All right. And he's demonstrating here, and he compares it to managing land and for forestry, right? And it's a great analogy and a great comparison when he compares the policies, generational policies, to managing forestry and being profitable in forestry, and he's relating that to policies. He's demonstrating a parent buying policies on, actually a grandparent buying policies on grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And then every generation does the same thing. So you have created an even distribution of age classes where you've created a very efficient wealth transfer from generation to generation, right? And I must say here, Ryan, that just like in equipment financing, if I digress a moment,
Mm-hmm.
the logger paid $40,000 a year for 4 years, and then he financed a truck in the 5th year. He had enough cash value in year 2 to finance a truck. And if he would have started 2 years earlier financing the truck through his system instead of Associates Finance, all of the numbers on the right side of that page would have gone up. The death benefit would have gone up. The cash values would have gone up. The same thing applies here. Nelson is demonstrating a grandparent buying a policy on a grandchild. You can back that up a generation and
Mm-hmm.
become efficient, more profitable sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, Nelson in particular, so he's showing the grandparent buying a policy on a grandkid from age 0 to 22, paying in $2,000 per year. And then, at this point, the grandparent has ownership of the policy. It's a financial asset, it's private property under the control of the grandparent. And the grandparent can decide to assign ownership of that policy over to the parent, over to the grandchild. He shows that by 22, using the numbers in the book, the grandchild will have about $100,000 in cash value. There's your college education, there's your business fund, there's your travel fund, you name it. What can a young person with $100,000 in equity that they own and control, what can they do with that? What will their life look like? And then later on, if we, assuming no additional financing, no additional banking activity, no additional premium payments paid, that young person, by the time they're 70, and we've talked about retirement, but at the time they're ready to take passive income, there's about $4 million there in cash value. And if they want a dividend of about $225,000 untaxable up to their cost basis for the rest of their life, you can have it. I mean, what a way to create the most tax-favored intergenerational system of capitalization. I mean, so people have asked me, oh, I'm too, one of the objections, I'm too old.
Yeah.
I should have done this 60, 70 years ago, whatever it is, I can't do it now. Absolutely, you can do it now. And I find that a lot of people have an interest in providing for the next generation once they get up in age. And this is a way to do it. It's a way to, and then I know you've talked to me about this before too, but you're not just passing on a financial asset. You're not just passing on an engine of capital. You're passing on all of the education about banking and capital and cash flows that must come with it in order to properly utilize that policy for the rest of the individual's life. And what's that worth? What's that worth to give the young person the ideas they'll need to succeed financially for the rest of their life?
I love that. When I encourage the thinking of backing it up a generation, starting one generation sooner, lead the way, show, the children and the grandchildren how to do it. Do it. You do it. You lead the way, and then structure it for them, and then teach them how to use it. It becomes, you will not believe the numbers.
Yeah.
It becomes phenomenal. Right?
And we should underline, that the policy, if you're the grandparent buying on a grandchild, you are the owner. And if
Yes.
you build cash value in that policy, you still retain all of the rights of a typical policy owner. You can collateralize that cash value, use the loan for what you want to do until you get to a point where you'd want to hand off the rights to that.
You mean I could take passive income on a policy that I own on someone else's life, and then they could potentially be the beneficiary on the policy that I own in my life? And if God calls me home, I graduate, the ownership transfers, even though there's outstanding loans, and then the net death benefit passes to them too. So I've given them a place to hold money. Right. And to put money, and I've given them money to put in there. Wow, what a wait! And I didn't call an attorney. And no, I love attorneys, right? Okay. And to create an estate plan, it's not their fault. Government, creates the estate taxation, and then they change it every 4 or 5 years, and so you've got to redo your planning every 4 or 5 years, and the attorney's time is worth money, right? But I didn't have to call them. I don't care what the government's doing or not doing, or what the tax bracket is or isn't. I'm like, oh, what's that worth?
That's high level.
How do you illustrate that rate of return on an illustration, right? Nelson talks about Frederick Bastiat, right? The 18th century philosopher, right? And he has an essay, That Which Is Seen and That Which Is Unseen. If you look at a life insurance illustration, or more than one, talking about intergenerational, you can only see what's on that illustration. There is so much that you can't see, the seen and the unseen. I'm telling you, once you're thinking, once you understand what's going on, and maybe there's some unlearning in addition to the learning, and unlearning is oftentimes much harder than learning. Okay, so then we see what's really going on with life insurance policy structured this way. There's nothing esoteric. There's no tax schemes, gimmicks. You're just buying high-priced life insurance. Okay. Oh my gosh, we got to get past the word life insurance too. Okay. Now, if we've done all that, we see what's really going on. Doesn't that free me to think outside the box and be creative? God's people are creative. So I don't know what can be done, and you don't either. But I'd like to see.
Yeah, I mean, it is the infinite
Oh my gosh,
banking concept.
It is. It's like, it'll make me cry there. Cut that out. I'm just saying that it's like, oh my gosh, it's we're passing wealth from one generation to another and keeping the control within our family, regardless of what the outside circumstances are, interest rates, markets. Who knows what kind of opportunities are going to show up? I don't know, but let's get to it and find out.
Absolutely.
A different look at the monetary value of a college degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this section really speaks to me personally because I came from the academic world, left a PhD program to become a practitioner full time. And so there's this recent experience with, not too recent, but a recent academic experience. And, a lot of people will, I don't want to be too hard on other agents or anything, but a lot of people will think that the infinite banking concept is just about the numbers, that it's just about the policies, it's just about the design and that sort of thing. There's so much more inside of becoming your own banker than just the numbers and just the policies. And this section on the value of a college education is an example really prime example. Um, Here, 2018, people can turn on the news and see what's happening on university campuses, the politicization. I mean, that's relatively new and has sort of surfaced, and people have seen what goes on in terms of free speech, what goes on in terms of safe spaces and this kind of thing. Um, but what's underneath that and what's been building for a very long time is the bureaucracy within the university. And sure, it's getting bad enough now to be on television, but this is nothing new. The university system and the government are very close together. Many of the universities are explicitly state funded. The few universities out there that are fully private have students who are paid by the government to go there, right, in the form of student loans that anybody can get. You don't even have to have a pulse to get. I mean, anybody who can fog a mirror can get a government student loan, regardless of the price. And then there's very few, maybe a handful of colleges that are private that don't accept any form of government funding. But even the faculty came from universities where even if that university wasn't state funded, the faculty there had been. You cannot escape the influence of the state at any level of the university system. I don't care where you go or whether it's ostensibly private or whether it's state funded. And so no surprise, it should be no surprise that the universities have become as bureaucratized as has anything else that the government gets involved in. DMV, healthcare, you name it, right? The university system has followed suit. And so what Nelson's doing is just providing an example of an alternative here. You could spend, he uses an example in the book of $20,000 for 4 years for a student. Yeah, that's like a semester nowadays, right? Double those numbers for what it would cost to go for a student to go to a reasonable university today. And then he shows what you can do with that money where you put it into a policy instead. And just if you put 20,000 in for 4 years and then you don't touch it, just in doing that alone, no additional premium payments, no loans, no repayments, no financing, none of that, you prepare that individual for passive income later in life without doing anything else. We're talking about $2.4 million in cash value at age 70, per the example in the book, about $145,000 in dividend passive income later on. And not to mention what the individual could have done with that cash value for the interim time period. And like I say, today, college is so much more expensive. Be honest, banker. Don't steal the peas. Use the same cash flows and double all the numbers that are in Nelson's book to talk about a 2018 sort of example. And just at the end of the day, if you understand the mechanics of the policies and how things are working, there is no comparison. And especially if someone has really internalized the previous part of the book where we talked about an even distribution of age classes, if there has been a parent that has already prepared the child for to enter into a sort of working career, or is ready to go off into maybe start their own business or enter society, and the parent has set up policies, now we're just starting to compound the benefits across generations. So it can, the comparison really falls away. And then you can pile everything on top of that we talked about just at the beginning of this segment about what university education has become. I ran for the hills. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. The entrenched bureaucracies and administration, a lot of the faculty, they've got sweet gigs, right? You can't fire anybody. You cannot fire anybody.
Yeah.
And all of the pay scales are just going up. So who would want to quit that? Who would want to quit that? And then for a lot of people, it's becoming just financially impossible. Paying for textbooks alone, not to mention the cost of the tuition. And Nelson also ties in, the idea of Parkinson's law here. People got a taste of college. They got a taste of government funding for that college. And then, my gosh, a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. Everybody wants a college education now. And shock and awe, the government's there to provide it. And so everybody has one. And so now you see this, what they call credentialism, which just means that everyone's got a bachelor's. So now you've got to have a master's. Pretty soon, everyone's going to have a master's, so now you're going to have a PhD. They're going to have to create new degrees to continue to keep people in this debt-funded system up until their 30s, which is happening now. It applies across disciplines, right? So my experience was in economics. The liberal arts is even worse. Medical, you're in this educational environment until your late 20s into your 30s. And then you get out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Talk about no comparison.
Trigger much?
So what if I'm uninsurable?
Well, you may have insurable interest on others, a family member, a business partner. If the insurable interest exists, Nelson has an example of this, right? If you have an insurable interest in others, you can become your own banker. There's some underwriting, hurdles that you have to get through. There has to be an insurable interest. There has to be a monetary, relationship there. But you can get into banking.
Yeah. And you've given examples with me before, too, of types of people you might have an insurable interest in. That's your parent, that's your kids, that's your grandkids, it's a business partner. Anybody that you would experience loss if they were to graduate preemptively, that's someone that you have an insurable interest in. And I've gotten the question before, does it have to be, do I have to be the one who's insured? And that's normally where people start. And the underwriter likes to see that, right? They like to see that the individual has life insurance on themselves, has death benefit on themselves before you begin to insure other people. And that's a good place to start. Most people can start there. But you'll find that once you do this for yourself and you understand it and you're into your working life and like paying premium, accumulating cash value, you'll end up in a place where you have to insure other people. And you'll look for anybody who you might possibly have an insurable interest in.
If you're building a policy or a system of policies to accommodate your need for finance, you will wind up insuring beyond your family. And you're right. You should start with yourself, your spouse, then your children. There's a natural expansion, right? But if you're uninsurable, then the process is still the same. Your family first, and then business relationships. In one policy will not typically get it done. What I mean by that, one policy won't accommodate all of your need for finance. So it's a natural expansion. More than one policy, getting more than one policy in place. And then it is life insurance, right? There is a death benefit. And there's a relationship of how much death benefit you can have. And it's typically a relationship of your income. There's an income factor because the death benefit is a replacement of your income when you pass. Or it could be like 1 times your net worth. Maybe you don't have an income or it's passive income. Well, I have a net worth of X, so I can have 1 times in death benefit of that net worth. And the structure is you're almost working backwards because we're solving for banking, but we have to take the underwriting requirements and limitations into consideration.
Points to consider.
Points to consider, final thoughts. I like what Nelson says. There are 2 sources of income, people at work or money at work. I like that. If you consider that if you become your own banker, just think, whatever you put in, you or your people are going to get at least that out, much more, literally. All right. And Will Rogers said one time, the return of my money is more important than the return on my money. And that applies, when you talk about, when you talk with people about investments, I should say, you rarely hear about the time they lost. Everybody wants to share their positive experience, right? So if you knew you were going to put money in and you or your people are going to get much more out, what's the problem? There shouldn't be a problem. And if you consider all of your money resides in somebody else's bank, all of your money flows through somebody else's bank, a bank in which you do not own. Man, my money should reside in an entity that I own and I control.
Right.
So I can perform the banking function as it relates to me in my personal economy, in my family's economy. Now, you do that over a long period of time, and it's staggering. Nelson clearly demonstrates that your need for finance is greater than your need for death benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And he clearly demonstrates that when the life insurance industry created this product of life insurance, it has more characteristics of a banking entity or a financing entity than it does life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, I just need to adjust my thinking or reevaluate or just consider what Nelson has done.
And it turns out that if you utilize dividend paying whole life insurance to reclaim control of the banking function, you'll end up with more death benefit than anybody will write on you anyway. And it's also true that your money will reside somewhere. It's happening right now. Your money's somewhere. Your capital is somewhere. Maybe you've put some intention behind it, some strategy into it before. Maybe you haven't. But the fact of the matter is that your money lives somewhere. And once you start to think about it, and you start to think about where your money might best go, you have options. You have real estate, right? You can build up equity in real estate. You can keep the money in the bank. You can play around in the stock market, or you can put money into life insurance. And as you said in the previous segment, it's not either or. You can build capital and dividend paying whole life insurance on incomparable terms, and you can go out and achieve the sort of investments that you want, and you'll even be exposed to the kinds of investments that you would attract to yourself that otherwise may not come your way.
I say it often, and I've heard it from Nelson, your money must reside somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just what you said. It needs a primary place of residence, just like you, just like me. From my primary place of residence, just like you, you can go anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country,
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of an opportunity, a vacation experience, whatever the opportunity may be. And when that has ended, you return home to your primary place of residence. What? That's your primary place of residence. Your money is no different. It must have a primary place of residence. From that residence, it can go anywhere to achieve anything that you want it to do. Take advantage of an opportunity, to enjoy an experience, and then return to its primary place of residence.
And you ought to be able to control and profit from that process.
Okay.
We really want to thank you. I mean, if you've made it through all of this, all of the video, our review of Becoming Your Own Banker, you've done a job. So you're a champion. Good job. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you read the book. We don't know whether you have watched us first or whether you've read the book first, but whichever one you've done, do the opposite. And if you've read Nelson's book once, go do it again. We do all the time. There's always more to learn. And if you want to get in touch with us to talk to us about it, you can do that too. But the main point here has been to bring attention to Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And I think our reason for doing this is really important. It is about the education. This is an opportunity for you to become your own banker, however you go about doing it, with whomever you go about doing it. But it does, you do have an opportunity to become your own banker and to reap the financial benefits in doing so.